Hi everyone, this is Anna and welcome back to Anna's Take with the Twist. Today we're talking about 3 things regarding this fantastic book called The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. And The Testaments is the sequel to Margaret Atwood's most famous book called The Handmaid's Tale. So the first thing we're going to talk about is some interesting facts about Margaret Atwood. Then my feelings about the Testaments before, during, and after reading it. And of course, all the different things that I'm hoping production is going to keep in mind because the TV series is being filmed here in Toronto right now. For anyone who doesn't already know, Margaret Atwood is with us on this side of the grass, and she lives in Toronto, very close to downtown Toronto. She is actually a middle child, and it is said that she started writing poems and plays when she was 6 years old. Now, I'm not really sure about this part because one website says that she started school full-time when she was 8 years old. Another website says that she started school full-time when she was 12 years old. So take your pick. For anyone who doesn't already know, that's a nod to Margaret Atwood. If you know what I mean, please leave a comment. I'm thinking she started school late because her father was a forest entomologist. I hope I said that correctly. Which explains why Margaret Atwood is actually very good with the human condition and how people interact with each other. Now, she did spend a lot of time in northern Quebec, in the forest there. Spent a lot of time in Sault Ste. Marie, Ottawa, where she was born, and Toronto. Some point her family moved to Toronto. I'm not really sure when. I think it was either late 40s or the early 1950s. I do know that she did graduate from Leaside High School in 1957. Now, Leaside is a part of Toronto better known as East York. So Margaret Atwood has said many times that she was a Girl Guide. Now, a few people know that she was actually a barista and apparently not very good at the till. She has admitted quite frequently that she's not the world's best speller, which I find kind of interesting, and she's not really great at typing. So I kind of like that because I'm not really great at typing either. Nor am I really great at spelling, to tell you the truth. So I thought that was just kind of interesting. She was a student of University of Toronto. She graduated, and she was also professor of U of T from 71 to 1972. She attended Radcliffe, which is now part of Harvard. And at some point, I'm not sure if it was when she was at University of Toronto or when she was at Radcliffe, she's actually really big on tarot cards. So like very, very into her tarot cards. She used to read her tarot cards all the time. And I know this because I read this in a book 14, 15, 16 years ago. And of course I donated that book, so I really regret that. And it's also on what's called the internet. Margaret Atwood's probably, like, she's done so many things. She's written like so many books, so many fiction, nonfiction, short stories, poems, like just everything. And she's actually also an inventor. I could talk about Margaret Atwood for probably an hour and still not get everything in there. She is most famously known for her book called The Handmaid's Tale. And the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, once again, is this book here called The Testaments. Now, The Handmaid's Tale was published in 1985, and the first time I read it was 1986 or 1987. There's a movie to The Handmaid's Tale that was released in 1990, and I'm pretty sure I saw that in I saw it on TV, I know that for a fact. Now, I don't remember what year, if it was 93, 1994, or 1995. This TV series for The Handmaid's Tale started filming here in Toronto either in 2014, or in 2015. And the first episode was released on April 30th of 2017. Still was not into rereading The Handmaid's Tale. And then the book called The Testaments was released on September 10th of 2019. So this book here, The Testaments, actually did phenomenally well. I didn't realize that until I started researching this video. I will say that I had absolutely zero interest in reading The Testaments. It just wasn't my vibe. I was more into reading like nonfiction books. Of course, this is fiction, or maybe now speculative fiction. And, you know, I would just kind of like read like, slow burn romances or romances. The Testaments broke Canadian sales records when it was published, selling more print copies in the first week than any other Canadian book since BookNet Canada began tracking sales in 2005. It sold so many copies that it was the #1 best-selling Canadian book of 2019, which is fantastic because the book came out on September 10th of 2019. And it was also the most borrowed library book in Canada for 2020, which makes sense because 2020 would have a full calendar year of the whole 12 months as opposed to the almost 4 months for 2019. So I was very, very impressed by that. Now, I am just going to say that, I did work on The Handmaid's Tale for seasons 4, 5, and 6 for the large crowd scenes, like almost half of the women in Toronto, and still was not into reading the Testaments. I'd seen it at the library. Obviously, I knew it was the best-selling book for Canada. I saw it at the library shelves. I knew it was flying off the bookshelves everywhere. I just couldn't get into it. Once again, just not my vibe. Then I worked on the season finale for season 6 for The Handmaid's Tale, still couldn't get into it. However, last year, 2024, I did reread The Handmaid's Tale. I rewatched the movie, The Handmaid's Tale, and then of course I rewatched all of the episodes because I did watch those again. I did watch those in 2022, so I watched them again last year in 2024. But still could not get into reading the Testaments. Even though I was booked to work on the Testaments earlier this year, and I worked on it for 2 days, still could not get into reading it. It was only when someone I was working with, we kind of met on the bus going to work. We couldn't find set, because it was in a weird location, not getting into where it was. However, she had said a couple of things, and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. And then I was starting getting for the second day, I thought, well, we're not doing what she said. And it seemed to me like she had some inside knowledge. I don't know why I thought that. Maybe she did. I don't know. So I was a little bit, now I went from not wanting to read at all to becoming a little bit hesitant. And then, now I'm just a little bit curious as to, what was actually happening. Because I saw some of the bookings coming up. And then I thought, okay, well, worst comes to worst, I'm just going to get the book from the library, and if I don't want to read the book, I'll just not read it. So I borrowed the book. Of course, I had to wait for it because it was on hold. Because there were so many books, I had to wait for it for about a week and a half, and there's still a lot of copies in circulation. So when I did get the book, even then I didn't read it right away. I just kind of sat with it, kind of looked at it a few times. That was it. Then I started reading it and I thought, okay, well, this is actually kind of interesting. So I started reading it. I'm going to read something from the desk cover. It says, I write these words in my private sanctum within the library of Arduo Hall, one of the few libraries remaining after enthusiastic book burnings that have been going on across our land. The corrupt and blood-smeared fingerprints of the past must be wiped away to create a clean space for the morally pure generation that is surely about to arrive. Such is the theory. But among these bloody fingerprints are those made by ourselves, and these can't be wiped away so easily. Over the years, I've buried a lot of bones. Now I'm inclined to dig them up again, if only for your edification, my unknown reader. If you are reading, this manuscript at least will have survived. Though perhaps I am fantasizing. Perhaps I will never have a reader. Perhaps I'll only be talking to the wall in more ways than one. Now that is actually Aunt Lydia. So that's why I really enjoyed the book. Because Aunt Lydia, we learn a lot about her. We don't learn a lot about her actual upbringing itself. We do learn some things. I'd be generous if I said there was 100 words dedicated to that, of her actually growing up as a child. However, really get into her head. So I really enjoyed that. So here's something from page 178. This is getting into Aunt Lydia's head. For a time, I almost believed what I understood I was supposed to believe. I numbered myself among the faithful for the same reason that many in Gilead did. because it was less dangerous. What good is it to throw yourself in front of a steamroller of moral principles and then be crushed flat like a sock emptied of its foot? Better to fade into the crowd, the piously praising, octuous, hunger-mongering crowd. Better to hurl rocks than to have them hurled at you, or better for your chances of staying alive. They knew that so well, the architects of Gilead. Their kind has always known that. And so here's something from page 238. Where there is an emptiness, the mind will obligingly fill it up. Fear is always at hand to supply any vacancies, as is curiosity. I have had ample experience with both. That again is Aunt Lydia. So I really like that. I really like getting into Aunt Lydia's head because she played such an integral role in The Handmaid's Tale, and she plays even a larger role here in the Testaments. Something else that I really liked was the witness testimonies from witness 369A and 369B. I really enjoyed knowing what it was like to live in Gilead and what it was like to live outside of Gilead. The book actually, there's a lot of death, let's just put it that way, in this book too. Although I will say that a lot of that is what I would call more muted. So, if you've read The Handmaid's Tale or you've seen this TV series or even watched the movie, you're gonna, The Handmaid's Tale is not a very feminine book, right? And that's probably why it wasn't my vibe. The Testaments isn't really all that feminine, but once again, it's muted, and the depths are a little bit more muted and more understanding, if that makes any sense. I don't want to give it away. So what am I hoping from production? I'm hoping that production is going to stick closer to the book. The 2 days that I was working on it were inside the book, were in the book. Maybe not exactly, because it's really hard to translate from one medium, which is a book, to another medium, which is a TV series. So they were those scenes were in the book. Tweaked perhaps, but yes, they were there. Is it going to be a limited series with 10 episodes, or is it going to be, 2 or 3 seasons? I'm not really sure. It could be a limited series with 10 episodes, and then also it could be over 3 seasons, 6 or 7 episodes each. That would kind of make sense. They could do that. I don't know. I mean, I don't write teleplays. I don't write screenplays. I write, scripts for YouTube videos. And I show up for those. But, and I will actually be doing more YouTube videos. It's just going through some stuff in my life. Nothing bad, just weird. You know how that is. Life sometimes just happens like that. So I don't know. I mean, it really, when I think back, because, I went from someone who didn't want to read the book to someone who was hesitant and then curious and thought, okay, well, whatever. And now, I'm saying that this book is just so incredibly fantastic that I have to give it at minimum a 4.5, but I'm really leaning towards a 4.75. That's how much I love the book. So once again, I don't know. Would I read this book again? I'm not sure. I mean, it took me about 30, 40 years to reread The Handmaid's Tale, so I'm not really sure if I would reread that. And the book is not an E for everyone, that is for sure also. At the same time, do you need to watch the TV series The Handmaid's Tale in order to read the Testaments? I would say you kind of do. I guess it really depends on the individual. However, I'm leaning towards yes, you would. I'm going to leave it up to you. Of course, anyone who does have any comments, please leave a comment. I'm going to leave a couple links in the description below for anyone who wants to purchase the book Handmaid's Tale or purchase the book The Testaments, both by Margaret Atwood. They're both fantastic books. And if you aren't going to read the Testaments, I really hope that you do watch the TV series. If you're not into reading, I totally get that. However, I would strongly recommend watching the TV series The Testaments, as it is the sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, and I know that from the 2 days that I was working on it, it's very, very interesting. Thanks again for watching Anna's Take with the Twist. If you liked today's video, please like the video, and of course you can always leave a comment, and yes, of course you can always subscribe. Thanks again, and that's a wrap.